All right, good morning, everybody. This is James Morris. It's Wednesday morning's edition of Ask the Master Auto Technician. And summer's well, I should say summer's right in the corner, but summer's really here if you think about it, because it's hot outside. And when it gets hot outside, you start thinking about cool things like turning your air conditioning on and having cool air come out at you. And it doesn't happen. It gets kind of bothersome. And since today's cars have dual zones on a lot of cars, we see cars coming in with one side cold, one side hot. And it's not so bad when it's the passenger side hot and it doesn't respond. But when it's the driver's side and you got to turn your air conditioning on and all you're getting is hot air and it's 90 degrees outside and you're getting hotter air blown on you, you start saying, well, what can I do to correct that? Well, a lot of people kind of go, what can you do? Well, it's not that difficult to determine what you got. It really isn't. You just have to understand how it works. You've got a mode door, which a mode door, when you hit mode, that tells it to come out the defrost or blow out at you or go down to heat cycle. That's mode, M-O-D-E. And so long as you've got that, that part is fine. But what I'm talking about on blend doors happen to do with, they control the temperature to the passenger side and the driver's side independently. Well, independently within a few degrees. It's not any more than usually 5 degrees difference is how they have it set. So if you got 60 degrees blowing out on the passenger side, you can't be any colder or much warmer than 60 degrees on the driver's side. So about 3 to 5 degrees difference is what you can get by with. But the biggest thing is you make sure that they work like they're supposed to. And when they don't work, it gets rather irritating. And a lot of times, one of the symptoms that I hear that let people know there's a problem is when you're sitting still in traffic and you hear your little, the actuator kind of rocking back and forth, maybe a tick, 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 or you hear it making noise like, What it's doing is trying to keep that blend door just like it's supposed to be. And the reason I speak about that is I have the same problem on my little Toyota. I got to go in there and replace the blend door. This one only has one blend door actuator, not two, so it's not that difficult. I'm just too lazy to do it. You know how mechanics are. We work on everybody else's cars but our own. But that's just one of those things that people, they have, and they kind of go, well, what can be done about it? Now, I do know that some vehicles, such as General Motors, when you get low on refrigerant, there's really nothing wrong with the blend doors. It'll get low refrigerant. The computer will allow only one side to get, I shouldn't say computer, it works where you only get one side cool, the other side's not cool. So most people think that they got a blend door problem. So the very first thing you need to do if you think you've got a blend door problem or an air conditioning problem is start the air conditioning up and go out and feel the lines going to and from the compressor. One side should be very hot that you can't put your hand on. Just touch it and you go, whoop, that side's pretty hot. The other side, coming back on the low side, the big line should be cold and it should be sweating. If it's working like, if it is, you got a full charge. There's nothing wrong with the refrigerant, the compressor, the evaporator, all that's fine. There's nothing wrong. But what you're going to find out is the blend door needs to be changed. Now, in most cases, it's not a real super big job. It's about maybe an hour per blend door to change. But you get some that aren't so easy. You have to pull the whole dash out. Give an example, blend door, they want you on some Toyotas. One side on dual unit takes about a half an hour to an hour to do. The other side takes 6 hours to do. Yeah, it takes 6 because you got to remove the dash to get to it. Some of them are very easy. Like I said, some of them are pretty tough. So that's something you might want to check out if you're having problems with it going and you're trying to understand what's happening to you, especially if you're sitting still and you notice that there's a little noise in your dash, kind of a creaking noise back and forth, and it's consistent. It's kind of rhythmic. You kind of go, what's making that noise? And if you're wondering if that is the blend door, just take your temperature control and bump it 1 or 2 times and see if it changes, goes away. If you bump it down lower or bump it higher and the noise, that creaking noise, that rhythmic noise kind of goes away, yeah, you got a blend door operation motor, time to change that blend door because there are plastic gears in there. What's happening is the gears wear out. They wear out. Instead of it being a tight fit, they actually wear out, so you see having things going against each other. And there might even be a tooth missing, and you might even get a click, 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 click. I've heard that before too. Customer goes, my car clicks when I cut it off. I go, really? Yeah, you cut the car off, and all of a sudden, you know, click, 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 and that's it. That is the blend door going back to the beginning, to start position, and there's a broken tooth in there, and that drives people crazy. Very common problem, but and some of them, like I said, are inexpensive to fix, and some of them are not very inexpensive to fix. But and you can find these things out by actually going on the internet and finding out how many hours it takes. There's nothing on that I charge or do that you can't verify the number of hours that it takes on, either on Mitchell or all of them. Normally it's in a half an hour of each other. But remember, those are guides. That's all they are. They're guides. It's not written in stone. If the book says it takes 7/10 of an hour and the shop charges you an hour, okay. Maybe they're charging you that because they got to get in your car and it's nasty. Man, I've gotten some cars I had to put a spray bomb in there to get the roaches out before I could work in them. Yeah, and I actually charged more for that job because really we had to take the car outside, let off a bomb in it outside, and watch all the roaches leave. After a couple hours, we went in there and did the work. But yeah, those are guides. So see what you've got to do to make sure a car is correctly repaired and you're worried about it. But best thing is to be on a first name basis with the shop that's doing your work. When I mean first name basis, the shop owner or the mechanic or the service writer, someone you can communicate with, let them know what your problem is and how, and if something's not right, let them know that it's not right. Too many customers don't complain about work. They just go away. They do. They just go away. Good customers don't complain. They don't. They just say, I ain't got time to fool with this. I'll just go somewhere else. I see that quite often. We don't want that to happen at James Auto Center. So what we do is, if you got a problem, we want to know about it. And we want to take care of it, and we want to fix it. And that's the only way we know how to do it is if you know. But what I try to tell my guys is every time a car goes, make sure that another set of eyes falls on that job that you worked on. Example yesterday. Car comes in, we do a radiator, water pump, belt hoses, some stuff like that. And the guy said, it's done. I said, has anyone looked at it besides you? He said, no. I said, it's not done. It's got to be looked at by another set of eyes. Well, the other set of eyes looked at it and found a 3-inch extension that he had left on the car. Now, he looked at the car twice, he said, I didn't see anything. I didn't see that. Another set of eyes always is one of those things that I have found out in business is a lot better because they're not focused on something else, and they say, well, what do you do here? What do you do here? And they start looking. And that is one of the things that I found out in making sure you have good quality control is make sure the shop you're doing, it does have good quality control, because if they don't, then you, the owner of the car, become the quality control agent. And I have found out customers that are quality control agents have a poor sense of humor. They really do. They don't understand when a socket gets left in a car. There's no excuse for it. They don't like that. I don't say it, I blame them. Or dirty rags left in the car, or dirty steering wheel, or dirty hand. Customers do not want to walk out to a car, grab a hold of the handle, open it up, and their hands are dirty. That's one of the things I tell my guys. I said, you make sure that car is cleaner when it leaves here than when it came in. That's why we vacuum cars out and make sure the air pressure is good. That's something that a lot of customers just aren't used to having. Years ago, that was common. You'd go get your gas put in a car, fill up with gas. They'd check your oil, your battery, your brakes. Look at all these things. I remember I used to do that back in the 60s. Car would come in for oil change, come in for $5 of gas. That was a lot of gas. And while we're pumping gas in there, we'd check their oil, we'd check their battery, we'd check their belts, we'd check their fluid levels. We'd look at all these things and make sure the car was safe. Check their wiper blades, check their headlights, their tail lights. We did all that while we were pumping gas. I know that sounds hard to believe. You can still do all that yourself, but most people don't know how, or don't think about they know how. But they really know how, they just haven't really thought about how to go verify all these things. But that's what we used to do, and still needs to be done today, and that's what we do when a car comes in before it leaves. If it comes in for an oil change, all those things get done. Not only do we change the oil, we inspect the lights, we check the brakes, we check the brake fluid, boiling point. I've had people say, boiling point of brake fluid? I didn't know brakes had a boiling point. Well, think about it. Brake fluid can't boil. If you put water in there, it would boil, because brakes operate around 500 to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit on the front brakes, or disc brakes do. And water boils at 212 atmospheric pressure. If you pressurize it, you can probably raise it to 260, 270. But that's about it. That's going to be too hot, and you don't want to have steam trying to stop your brakes. So we have brake fluid that has to be changed about every 2 to 3 years. Yes, ma'am.
Well, most people don't understand what you're talking about, because brakes are big round things and things that hit up the rotors and then the pads. So you talk about brake fluid boiling. I mean, where's the brake fluid at?
Well, the brake fluid is in the calipers, those things that are riding on top that have the brake pads in them. That's where the brake fluid is. And it's usually at the very top, and heat travels up. And if you got that at the very top of the wheel...
So what's a caliper?
The caliper is a thing that squeezes the rotors to slow the car down. When you push the brake pedal down, these squeeze.
So it's like a bracket that the pads mount
Correct.
to?
That's right. And that bracket that the pads mount to...
And it's attached by what? I mean, where's the brake fluid at?
The brake fluid is inside the calipers. When you push the brake pedal, that fluid is going into the caliper, and it squeezes the pads against the rotor to slow the car down.
So how do you get the brake fluid in the caliper?
Boy, you need to take an automotive class. No, the brake fluid in the caliper is from the master cylinder. And most people, if you don't understand how brakes work, you have a master cylinder that's in the very top of the car, and that's where you put your brake fluid in. That's where you test it out. That's where the brake fluid goes. It's always been in all cars. If you have hydraulic brakes, you have a master cylinder with a reservoir.
So there's different types of brakes. You have hydraulic brakes. You have electric brakes.
Mm-hmm.
So most cars have hydraulic brakes, where you, like you say. So the master cylinders, how does the brake fluid get from the master cylinder to the caliper?
When you push the pedal down. Your brake pedal.
It just magically goes there, or does it go in some kind of line or hose?
It goes in the line. It goes. I tell you what, I did not realize that the inquiring minds wanted to know all these things, but yes, it goes from the master cylinder through brake lines, through flexible brake hoses that are not rigid. It could go to the caliper, where they get it very, very hot. And brake fluid has a boiling point, like I said, it's brand new, around 500 degrees Fahrenheit. It's got to be that. If you don't have it around that, you're going to have problems. It's going to make rust because it absorbs moisture. I see cars come in at boiling point of brake fluid 265. Water boils at 212, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, just barely above boiling. That means that system is full of water. That means it's making rust. That means it's making your calipers lock up. It means all that sludge and stuff that's inside there.
So who put the water in there?
It's hot. God put the water in there because it's moisture in the air that gets absorbed through the system. That's how it gets in there. Inquiring minds want to know these questions, but that's exactly, and thanks for the questions, Anna Marie. That's one of the things that helps out. Let people know, because I guess some people I take for granted that most people know that brake fluid comes from the master cylinder through the lines to the brake calipers when you push the brake pedal down. But a lot of people may not. So if you don't know much about brakes, come by James Auto Center. We'll be more than happy to explain to you what's going on. Even that noise that you hear about, that your shop says, oh, don't worry about that brake noise, it means something. Not only does it mean something, it's irritating as heck. That means you've got pads that are vibrating that weren't installed correctly, or someone just did a pad slap, put new pads on old rotors. So now you got mismatched surfaces which have problems. And people can't say, well, I don't understand why I have problems. Well, because you didn't do the job right. You did it halfway. Either do a brake job right or don't do it at all. I've had people come in here all the time, just throw pads on that. I go, I ain't touching that car. If I fix it right, or I don't touch it. Because the state law of Florida says if we do something and we know that it's not right and we charge a customer for it, and we even explain to the customer it's not right, and even if they sign off on it, we know it's not right and it's dangerous, you, the shop, will be held liable in case someone gets hurt or there's property damage. I'm serious. Don't do it. Hey, this is James Morris. You've got a car question, call us 850-763-0555. Karen Schoen should be calling in a minute. I think we're going to be talking about what she had on her show last night. I have no idea. So give us a call or just listen up. We'll be right back.
If you want the best deal in town for tires, you need to call Baytown Tires at 873-8900.
Hanson and the guys at Baytown Tires take pride in serving Panama City for over 20 years. Baytown Tires on Highway 98 in St. Andrews. All service work backed by a nationwide warranty.
Part of what I'd like to let you know is what we do and how we work our system. Basically, we've got about 700 stocking dealers scattered around the 15 counties here in the Big Bend area of the state. I run a fleet of trucks, vans, and what we call hotshot vehicles to deliver to our dealers quickly so they can help service you as fast and efficiently as they can. Provide timely and efficient service, and we're there to take care of our dealers, who in turn can take care of their customers.
So, the I'll get there quick plumbing guy got there quick. To be fair, he did fix the leak in the kitchen drain. Too bad this is the bathroom. Mr. Rooter Plumbing ensures we fix what you see, and even what you don't.
All right, welcome back to our show. This is James Morris. I have Karen Schoen calling all the way from Greenwood, Florida. Karen, good morning. How are we doing?
Good morning. Had another beautiful day in sunny Florida.
Well, yeah. Well, the sunshine sometimes comes in liquid forms, but we appreciate whatever we get. Now, one of the things, I know the 23rd of June there's going to be the Chipley Watermelon Festival, and I remember a few years ago you campaigned really, really hard, running up and down the streets of the Watermelon Festival, people passing out your literature about running for office. And what has changed about the festival over the years that you know about? Because I know you go to it all the time.
Well, it seemed to get bigger, which was always exciting.
Yes, it is. I had no idea.
People became engaged. That was, you actually learned about watermelons, which was really interesting.
I had no idea. The only thing I've learned about watermelons the last few years, for every seed, it takes a grain of pollen to make one seed in a watermelon. So the more seeds you have, the more pollen that's gotten to it from bees or animals that help pollinate. That's one of those things I've learned. That's the only thing I know about watermelons, and that's what little I do know.
Well, the other thing we know is that they taste really good.
And I know they're expensive. I was in Walmart the other day, and a little round watermelon about this big, about the size of a basketball, was $7. I went, man, I remember when they were 50 cents and $1. I mean, what has happened to our money supply?
I remember when we couldn't give them away.
Yeah, same thing. You couldn't give away watermelon. I mean, people would sit there and say, I have a whole truckload of watermelons, and now they're $7 a piece at Walmart, and people can't get enough of them. I mean, as fast as they pull them out there, they take them up to the counter. But this Watermelon Festival on the 23rd, I'm going to be judging the car show. They're going to be having an antique car show there, I believe. When I say antique, I should say collectibles.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, yes.
They are really interesting. They have a really incredible group of cars. And it's always nice to have a little nostalgia. You go back and, I remember that car. My dad had one like that.
Well, yeah, think about it. When we first, my first cars I remember, were 63 Corvairs or 57 Chevys or 64 Dodge Darts. Those are the cars.
My first car was a 64 Corvair.
Mine was a 63 Corvair.
Oh, my goodness.
Did you have a 4-door or a 2-door?
I had a 4-door.
So what did I?
They were stick, and I never drove a stick before.
Uh-huh.
And my boyfriend at that time was living in D.C., and D.C. was hilly, and I remember he refused to drive because he said it was so fun to see me roll down the hill.
There's a lot of hills in Washington, and if you have a clutch, if you're not knowing how to do it, it can be a challenge. My first car was a 63 Corvair. It was given to me because the clutch went out on it. The guy didn't want to pull the transmission or pull the engine out to put a clutch in. And I was like 12 years old, and it took me from the time I was 12 years old to the time I was 16 to get the clutch in. It took me like 4 years. I was working in my backyard, I didn't really know what I was doing. But I learned a lot.
Yeah, the sad part is the kids today don't have that.
Well, that's the thing.
I don't even think they know how a car works. I don't even think they know what pieces and components are put together. All they know is that you go in the car and you sit and you push the button.
Well, and speaking of pushing buttons, that's what I was thinking about yesterday. That 64, I want to say the 64 Dodge Dart. I may be wrong, but the Chrysler had, when you push the car, to make it go in park or reverse or neutral or drive, you pushed a button. That's what you did. You pushed a button, and that was a select transmission they had. And that was back in the 60s. I worked on a 2016 Volkswagen yesterday, and it had push buttons to make it go in park, reverse, neutral, drive. Same thing.
Wow.
And I'm going, but these are electronic. They're not, that's the difference. Back then, everything was analog, and when you pushed a button and it manually moved something, which manually made it go in gear, it was analog. This is all digital. It's incredible how much better.
And look at the difference. Look at what we've done. The cars that used to be $3,000 are now $30,000.
Well, and I was reading today that someone said cars are relatively inexpensive for this part of the century. And I'm sitting here going, are we on the same planet? I'm going, because right now an average price of a car, and please catch if I'm wrong, I'm not wrong by much, is around $33,000 or $34,000.
That's right. And I remember my first car that I ever bought new was a 1966 Camaro, and that was $3,700.
Yeah.
And I was able to pick out the colors of the exterior and the interior and mix and match and do whatever I wanted.
Okay.
I could have different color for the top, different color for the bottom, different color for the interior. Can't do that now.
Wait, no, you can't do that. Now, back then, I was sitting here, you're talking about 1966. Back in 1966, a silver quarter, a 25-cent silver, 90% silver, a 10% copper was worth 25 cents.
That's right. And you know what? It also bought a gallon of gas.
It did. Now, that same 1964 quarter, not 66, but a 64 quarter, is now $3, if I'm not mistaken, is what it's worth. I may be wrong, but that's what a gallon of gas costs.
Because it's the silver content. Yes. It actually has silver.
So what's happened, in my opinion, what's happened is, and I think I speak for a lot of people out there, inflation and the devalue, our monetary system has made our dollars more worthless. And like when I opened my business up in 1980, I'm looking at a labor chart over here from 1980. I saved for my business, and what was I? I think I originally was $22 an hour back in 1980. Now we're over $100 an hour. So, and it's not that we're greedy, it's because we've had to keep up with inflation, and that's what's killing. That's why a lot of people can't work on their own cars. Kids can't. That's why the kids have lost car culture, because you have to have at least a couple years of electronics training to be able to work on today's cars. You just can't go out there and change a set of points because there's no points. You can't go out there and put spark plugs in it. Well, you could, but you might break them off in there if you do it wrong. And spark plugs last forever. So there's nearly not much a kid can do to make. You can't go buy a beater. I think that's what we call them, a beater for $500. Throw an alternator or water pump on and drive it for a year, like I could do back in the 60s and 70s. You can't do that anymore. You might be able to, but it's the rare individual that can do that. Kids can't do it.
And the sad part is because learning on the car helped you to learn on other things. So when you applied that to something else, to fix something in the house, you don't do that anymore either, because there's no knowledge of fixing anything. It's easier to be disposable and throw it away.
Well, yeah, and being disposable is something that we see a lot of times on cars. I did not realize the other day that you have is it 7 or 8 year car payment, Santa Marie? What did we say on that?
We were talking about 7-year car payments.
It was I think there's 7-year car payments now.
I know.
I want to what? 7.
I know.
7 years.
I was aggravated that I had to have a 3-year car payment.
I've never, like I said, I'm 7 years. It just blows me away because what I see by the time a car gets 7 years old, if you've done good maintenance on it and you've done like you're supposed to, you've got 70 to 100,000 miles on it. That's about, and it's in good if you do the maintenance on it. If you don't do the maintenance on it, you have that many miles on it, and you've got a car ready for the salvage yard.
You made your last payment, and you're able to squeak it along and then tow it to the salvage yard.
Well, and I know that sounds, so dramatic, but we see so many people that come in here and use the wrong oil. You don't put the right antifreeze in it. Don't change their antifreeze or oil or brake fluid. We talked about that earlier. And they wonder, why do I need to change my brake fluid? And I go, well, because you got a $3,000 ABS unit over there that if you put the wrong brake fluid in it, you ruin it. Or if you keep the old brake fluid in it, you ruin it. And that's what happens. It requires maintenance. And adults, children, they just don't realize the physics, the chemistry that are involved in keeping today's cars. Today's cars are also safer than they used to be. You remember that you said your first car was a Corvair. Now, that Ralph Nader wrote a book that made him famous called Unsafe at Any Speed about the Corvair.
About the Corvair.
Unsafe at any speed. You get carbon monoxide poisoning, the engine could fall out, the front end you had no engine in the front end, so if you got in a head-on collision, you were like a Volkswagen Beetle. There was no protection up there. But, all these things talked about it, but Corvairs were ahead of their time. They had independent suspension. They had dual carburetors on a lot of them. They had dual carburetors, or they had turbochargers on them, or they had 4-speed transmissions instead of 3 speeds. They had a lot of things that were cutting. Well, good. You were on a cutting edge. I
love that car. I thought that was the newest car. I was so upset when I got rid of it.
Well,
but I couldn't. I lived in New York. I could barely keep one car. I couldn't keep two cars.
Well, speaking of New York, now back then you lived in New York. Now I don't know if you lived in New York State or New York City, but
I lived in Brooklyn and Queens.
Okay.
And spent a lot of time in Manhattan.
well, back then a lot of people drove their own car, correct?
Yes.
Now they
Yes,
don't, do
absolutely.
they? They can't drive their own car because now parking is an issue.
Parking and the price of the cars. By the time you finish with paying for the car, and then you have to pay for the parking space, and then you have to pay rent, you're paying twice as much for the car that you are for the apartment that you're living in.
Well, that's why they're saying by the year 2030, 80% of the cars on the road will be not on the road anymore. We're going to go from 234 million cars on the road down to around 77 million cars. That's what they're saying by the year 2030 because personal ownership is going away. The millennials do not want to have a car. The millennials are being taught that they shouldn't own anything, that they should rent. Oh.
And this is part and parcel of it. So if you have no ownership of anything, you have no vested interest in anything, so why would you care about anything? And unfortunately, this is what our millennials are being taught. So instead of being taught the value of America and how important it is to own and to build equity, and you can use that equity to create a business, to do whatever it is that you want to do in your business, like if you tried to start your business today, you'd never be able to do that.
Oh.
But you have a business, and you've built it up, and it has an excellent reputation when it comes to the time that you feel that you want to sell it. You have something that you own, that you've created, that will create wealth for you. Our kids today are not learning that.
Well, they're not buying houses either, I think. Oh, well, maybe they are buying.
Not.
I don't know if they are or not. I can't answer that question. I just know that things are changing, and I used to say that these things wouldn't happen, but I see it right now where kids can't work on cars. The state of Florida and other states have made it more difficult for a teenager to drive a car till they turn 18. They have a lot of, you can't drive after 9 o'clock at night or when it's dark or whatever. I don't know all the rules, but I know if you don't graduate, you can't get a driver's license. Those things you have to. There's a lot of things out there that make it where children don't have that car culture that you and I grew up with. And
the car, think about it. What did the car do for us? It gave us total independence. Once you got in that car, and you were the boss. You chose where you were going. You chose how you were getting there. You made the choices. Our kids today are incapable of making choices, and as a result, driving to them, everything is becoming automated. They are not going to be doing anything, so their brain is not going to be used to using and making choices and decisions.
Well, I'll tell you,
everything is going to be done for them, and this is where all of this is leading, which to me is the scariest part.
It is scary out there. Karen, I'm up against clock. I got to go. We're going to find out. But you know what? I do believe that the being youth, having the wisdom, having a young person having wisdom is not as much fun when you're young. That's one of the things I have learned. Having a lot of wisdom when you're young isn't a lot of fun. But as you get older, it saves you a lot of grief. Anyway, Karen, thank you so much. We'll be talking to you again next week. All right, everybody. We'll be